Thank you for tuning in to Andronetalks Radio, gathering as one in our sovereign truth from a galactic perspective, exploring our world with new ideas, knowledge, and a promise of a better future. Galactic discussions for galactic-minded people. Andronetalks.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today on Andronetalks Radio. We are returning once again to discuss the topic of life with the cosmos clearance, and the book is written by Daniel M. Salter. We have his grandsons here, Derek and Daniel, and also the book was told to Nancy Red Star, so we don't want to exclude her because she was a very important part of the book as well. And as I said before, this book, I highly recommend people purchasing it because it's amazing the vast amount of information that is covered. If someone doesn't understand what has transpired over the past 100 years or so regarding intelligence and regarding some of the, tracing back to secret societies and where they came from, also extraterrestrial activity, and also the ACIO, the wing makers, and covering, a lot of information. So I feel like I understand and recall a lot of this information. So without further delay, I'm just going to introduce Derek and Daniel and say hello.
Hi. Yeah.
Be here. Yeah.
Thanks for
excited
having
to talk
us.
some more with you on this.
Great. So, and that's what we're going to do. And I think, so this is part 2, because we already did the first show, an introduction to this information. I've had people contact me and said that they've purchased the book, and some of them have already read it. They went right through it and really enjoyed it. And as much as I'd like promoting people's books and helping them or whatever, but I think it not only helps you guys, but it helps a lot of people to kind of be on the same page and catch up with a lot of information maybe that has been leaked out over the past 50 years or so or more.
Yeah, we don't have any financial ties to the book or anything like that, but it does benefit to have the information out there for people to just tap into some higher consciousness type information that they might not be aware of. So we're really grateful whenever anyone can get their hands on it and take a look at it.
Yeah, and so that's what we're going to do. We covered the first 4 chapters, so we're going to have a link below, so if people want to review and listen to, everything that we discussed. And then on this discussion, we're going to cover chapter 5, 6, and 7, and discuss some of the topics there. So, but Derek, you said that you would like to do an overview of what we had discussed in the past, or anything that we might have not covered.
Yeah, if you don't mind, maybe I'll just touch upon, because it's when you look into this book, you'll see there some of these chapters, some of these go together quite well, which we were just discussing. They go into kind of the German technology and how it all started, and some are very esoteric, some are probably brand new subjects to people. So I'll try to briefly summarize some of it, because the Disclosure Project's pretty obvious to most people that happened, and that's what our grandfather was a part of, and went there to the National Press Club hearing with Dr. Stephen Greer in 2001, and Dr. Greer's known in the disclosure movement quite well. So for our granddad to be a part of that project in the early stages when it just came out is a big deal. And we were just trying to still wrap our heads around that when it happened, because we didn't know the extent, the gravity that held in the community. But so that was the first chapter, his acknowledgement of that and what took place there. the weaponizing of space, I think he really kind of goes then straight into more or less the narrative that's been spun, and the way the CIA and these intelligence agencies want to take the information, compartmentalize it, keep it on for their own, and then steer or spin a narrative however they see best fit to the general public, and making it seem like all these advanced beings, or there's these other races out there, but they're all out to harm us, and we have to weaponize space. We have to have a way to defend ourselves and all this other stuff. That it's just that has been a propaganda from day one, since the 40s, since Roswell happened, since all that was going on. So people need to be very aware of that. Not to say there aren't negative forces out there. Surely there are. And our grandfather knew somewhat on both sides, the good and the bad. I don't think he dwelled on the bad too much. And I think at the end of the day, he knew our interactions with these beings had more of a, I guess, had more of a impact one way or another on our future, on where we were going to go. It's up to us on how we handle and interact with these beings. So our consciousness, especially our level of consciousness and awareness, is all tied into that. So anyway, that's the second chapter into weaponizing space. But I think some of the other chapters, like the Kalahari retrievals, might not be as well known, and I didn't know much about it either in going through a lot of what types of crashes occurred. But this happened in the South Africa and in the late 90s, or sorry, late 80s, like 80s, 90s. That's what he said. Apparently, that's where we got a lot of technology also that we use today, or more of the technology we have. Of course, we were using it since Roswell and all of those, and we did a lot of alien reproductive vehicles, all these advanced types of systems, spacecrafts that we've been using this extraterrestrial technology from. Anyway, he says that was a big event, and as far as some of the governments getting access to those technologies. But he mentions this woman who's been a contactee since the 50s, and her name was Elizabeth Clare, I believe. Yeah, I believe it's Elizabeth Clare. And she wrote a book called, now that I'm trying to go back and look for it, what was the name of that book? It had to do with sort of the next topic, like void to mass, but had to do with the light, the
light waves, time and space travel.
The beyond the light barrier. So she was in contact with this being called, I think his name was
Akon.
Akon. So he was contacting her from the 50s all the way till she died in the 90s. But beyond the light barrier is basically a kind of almost like a download of all the technology, how it works, how these advanced beings, especially some of those that are trying to help us, how they use the universal laws of the natural laws of the universe to go beyond space and time, to be able to travel these vast distances, and how that works. So it really gets into almost like the esoteric side of when you look at things and Christ consciousness, and using that energy and kind of tapping into and actually, I think we go into later on to the German technology. It talks about vril, so almost like other beings use that term vril, but it's the life force within the universe that's being tapped into. And so Elizabeth Clare goes pretty good into that description in that book.
Just to clarify, the Kalahari retrievals was actually a craft that was shot down by two Mirage fighter jets that had this experimental laser beam technology that they were working with, and two entities were recovered and brought back to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, and that's the incident that Derek had mentioned that happened in Africa, and they were the similar entities that had contact with Elizabeth Clare. So that's the connection there. Just wanted to clarify.
Right. And so then just the fourth chapter goes into what's called from void to mass, wave particleization. So our grandfather claimed that he worked in projects with particleization, and he worked under a genius, Benoit Mandelbrot. And so it's interesting how he's of course, his whole story is very interesting, and how if that's that's in fact the case of what happened. He claimed that he was at Eglin Air Force Base, and that's where they had the largest climatic hangar in the world at the time in the 50s. But Benoit Mandelbrot probably worked on many of these compartmentalized, highly classified projects. And so I guess our grandfather claimed that he worked under him, and they were working on the Mode 6 transponder, which is basically the black box that's in every aircraft, or that had been for however many years. So he was working on that with Mandelbrot. Apparently, he knew about the UFO subject, and maybe at some point they started having discussions. And because Benoit Mandelbrot knew about this technology that came from these advanced beings, I think he started to warm up to my grandfather, who wanted to know more information over time. And then what he claimed is that eventually the government found out he knew more than he should. And so should he be brought into those projects, or should they try to just get rid of him one way, or however they have to keep him quiet? So they looked into his background, and they eventually let him into the project. So he claimed that he worked with Benoit Mandelbrot on this particleization type of technology, and that's that goes into space travel, time travel, with probably back to what the Philadelphia experiment was doing.
Yeah, in Montauk.
In Montauk. So I think those technologies were being utilized and maybe compartmentalized in what he was working on under Benoit Mandelbrot. And of course, Mandelbrot's known for his fractal, fractal holographic type of principle that Mandelbrot set, right? So
it's just kind of cool to watch the construct of how they create the Mandelbrot and just going into these patterns.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
And it's like forever going through these patterns. It's brilliant, and it's really interesting to observe, to watch it.
And I think a lot of people that are on this like new psychedelic kind of like, we're looking at other forms of reality. They take the Mandelbrot set a lot of times and use that imagery because it's so cool.
Yeah, like someone on an acid trip or something from the hippies. Yeah.
They do like to use that.
Well, because I think when you're doing psychedelic drugs, you start to have a hyper focus on things, which is essentially what it is you're looking at a grander picture, and then you're focusing in on something, and then it goes, what is inside there, and so it's almost like you're looking at a deeper molecular or quantum field.
Right,
yeah.
right. And it almost brings up a lot of those spiritual questions about reality and, as above, so below, and, the macrocosm versus the microcosm. And I think we've talked before, like, I love people like Nassim Haramein. I think he's more of a cutting edge physicist, and what he talks about, because he really explains the scale of things, and he's able to predict know what the mass of a proton is and the radius and all these calculations. But anyway, he kind of ties in the fact that, the human body itself is kind of in the midpoint on the scale of the whole universe, of the spectrum of the very, very minute to the super string level, subatomic particle string level, to, the very vast, the biggest pieces of matter of the universe you can think of. So anyway, that's kind of a cool idea. And I don't know how much he really goes to the extent of that. He just explains what particleization is and how that's part of this type of technology.
And that we have that capability in our pineal gland. He mentions that quite a bit as well.
That's right. So that's right.
Being able to tap into that, is something that only like masters are able to do. I'm sure with that right technology can be done.
And I think that ties back to the Montauk and what they were doing and experimenting with, and trying to use kids to do that and manifest the good and the bad. But apparently they manifested this monster in the end. And
yeah,
similar to the Stranger Things.
I think that was Duncan Cameron talked about that, and I was fortunate enough to meet him just to kind of get an idea of the type of person he was, and generally a good person, but some of the practices that he was involved in were of question. People, felt like ethically some of the things weren't right that he was involved in. And I think he had a great deal of regret regarding some of it, but overall was seemingly a kind person, and also an incredible amounts of pain, from these projects and experimentation that he participated in. that brought him into that situation that was very challenging. But yes, getting deeper, this is why this whole thing with CERN and getting into tapping into that quantum field with not the right state of mind, or with torture being introduced to bring that in, is a really bad combination. And that's essentially how it's happening. Whereas people can tune into that naturally. I mean, people think they need psychedelics or what other things, which also brings in a partial entry into the field. Part of it is contrived. It's introducing some other things. So the energy of, say, whether it's ayahuasca, so you get the plant, and then whoever else is involved in that also introducing information that might not have been there had you just, did your simple meditations, which would have opened it up naturally, organically, and then you would have had more of clarity and truth rather than confusion or trauma. Or for some people it was good, but they don't really know why they did it. So it's sort of, there's a natural process to it. And so everything the science is figuring out is something that already existed, that humanity has already been experiencing for thousands and thousands of years.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was going to say, just to end on that chapter, or what that was discussing, maybe Jessica, I think what you deal with more on your day-to-day, and what the ACIO apparently is doing, and kind of these alternate forms of reality, maybe even time travel and things, it kind of ties really into that whole idea, and this concept of the fundamentals of how the universe really works and what we can tap into.
Yeah. I mean, the people that years ago, and the travelers have been around for a long time, a very long time, and you usually associate them with steampunk or whatever, because I mean, it's way in the 1800s before we had any of this technology. They were jumping through time. So yeah.
Those stories have all been suppressed and kept from us so that we can't realize and step into our own power and our own, abilities. And that's why it's important to share this information and just give that power back to people to realize these things.
Yeah, that's a perfect example. And also, I wanted to bring up something as I started looking through. I was working on the 5th chapter, and I keep on thinking about how people want to demonize the information, like that's good, that's evil. And essentially, he gets into the topic of, the polarities and the different types of energy, the male and the female, and all of that. And so there's dark matter in our universe, but dark matter alone is not what's evil, but people think it is. So this chapter talks about the black sun, and I have had so many. It's Vienna and the Black Sun. That's the chapter we're going to be looking at. And I was really excited to read about it because he represented the information really well and explained it. And the black sun is something that has always existed. It existed way back in time. The swastika is something that's been around for a very long time. And the swastika has an important meaning, right? According to what your grandfather wrote, I mean, it is actually the motion in the entry to this energy.
Right. Yeah, it's an ancient symbol from the Far East, and when Hitler and the Nazis took it, they actually flipped it and rotated it to give it to that negative polarity to it, and have it embody like the opposite force of that.
Right. And he talks about how it was connected to it with whether it was male or female, and then misusing. It was just like anything. You can, start a fire. You can start a fire to warm yourself. You can start a fire to hurt somebody. So it's the same idea, whatever the concept was, whatever the experience or the exploration was, and what they were trying to do. In the very beginning of the chapter, something interesting comes up, and they talk about mind control. And Peter recently and I have been talking about these mesmerizers that are here or have been here throughout time. It's a very confusing topic, and I think it should be addressed. And we did, it did do a show about the Nazis, and I explained my recall because I was, earlier lifetime, I was Sigrun, who was, the daughter of Odin. I think that was one of the references in working with Maria Orsic. So people ask me about Maria Orsic, and I could recognize her anywhere. She has many faces. She doesn't just have one face because she's a traveler, right? And just like Saint Germain, people say, well, Saint Germain's just this one person. Yeah, he is, but his face looks similar, but then it alters and he looks different throughout time as a traveler. So I have lots of memory recall, and maybe we could share the link and how people can listen to that show as well of some of the recall that I have in that experience. But the information about Hitler, one of my memories is that he had a power, a supernatural power, which was obviously something was attached to him in some way. And to the point where you were actually, for me, in my recall, you felt immobilized in front of him, like you really couldn't move, felt uncomfortable. And if he was angry, you would feel the energy or the fear. So he definitely had some kind of energy, but they were tapping into some other things that were very old. For example, Aldebaran, however people pronounce it, was a civilization that existed. And before humanity, these wars or powers that existed would come into play way before humanity, and they brought those struggles here. And so humanity got involved. So despite the whole thing that people say that Hitler was, he was against the Jews, but he was also Jewish. And so he was manipulated to do some of the things that he did, which doesn't ever make it right, but also that he was introducing powers and energies that they were still trying to discover, and they were opening things up. Mm-hmm. In my understanding and recall, Aldebaran is a feminine-based civilization. They have a matriarch. They were like these high priestesses type of energy. So you have this very strong feminine energy that came in, which is amazingly covered over the next 3 chapters. Yeah. Is how this feminine energy comes into domination. And so just like if you have a pendulum and say, or we can bring up politics, probably shouldn't, but we will. You go far to the right and then it swings far to the left. Yeah. And there's no other way around it. That energy is built into our existence in our construct, right? So there are natural laws. Yeah. The natural laws that allow free energy, right? But there's also natural laws that create balances or polarities and right. These things. That goes back to the early Egyptian teachings, the mystery religions, Madame Blavatsky and all of that, going back to those earlier teachings, where the Hermetic teachings, where they talk about the natural laws. So I thought that was interesting that he brought that up. He brought up the ancient worlds of Babylon, Syria, Egypt, Phoenicia. So earlier in time, we have these galactic, battles and struggle over power. They bring that here to humanity and the earth, and you see it displayed in ancient Babylon. Mm-hmm. And he starts getting into that, the Babylon mystery religions, they call it, in the story of Semiramis. So, and I know this is going to, for people on my channel, they understand because I did, I have also a connection to Semiramis in Ishtar. Mm. And so, which carries on to, some of the other connections that I have. So I have memory as well. And I did, I channeled I don't know, about hundreds of transmissions of information from Andromeda through the Andronicus transmissions, which I did, which talked about this galactic conflict that happened prior to coming here, and how they would pull people out and then they'd reinsert them back into civilization, and then get, then they would have knowledge or power from, that's one way that they would introduce newer technology or information about the world. But, if anyone wants to hear more of that, we have that available on our radio channel, Andronetalks Radio. So just getting back to the book, I'm just excited because I'm seeing a lot of things go back and forth.
Yeah. And Hitler and the organizations that he was involved with at the time, they considered that time frame like the new Babylon. That's what they were trying to create, to like get back to that energy and bring that back into their golden age that they wanted, with his Fourth Reich eventually of rule, having control over the people with his superior race. That was kind of got mixed in the themes of their convoluted view of what that looked like, and yeah, they brought it through the channels, through the the different things that they channeled, the Sumerian stuff that they had, and they had people to translate it with from the Knights of Malta and the different secret organizations that were involved at the time, to be able to give them all the information that they needed from that. But it all came from ancient origins,
And I've had discussions, regarding in those shows that I used to do years ago. We've had discussions with people that had connections to Lyra, and they said the Lyrans are Aryans. You essentially see the name in Aryan, Lyran, and they come from this region which I call the Vegas, and Vega, that whole star system there was where I used to see Shiva. So you have the connection between the Shivites and the ancient Sanskrit, Hindu, Indian belief systems coming from that part of our galaxy, which is very old and was one of the earliest languages on the planet. And we learn about the Vimanas, which were their spaceships, and we have even their buildings look like the Vimanas, and how that they would be anti-gravity vehicles and were able to come in and out of our space. So all of this goes back. So this was the distortion. What Hitler, Himmler, and then the Vril, when they started to take a look at this, they didn't know what to do with it. It was like a child holding a weapon. It was very powerful. It had ancient ties. It had ancient beings that undoubtedly were coming through, and I know through Maria Orsic. I mean, they gave her a whole bunch of information how to build a ship. And, likewise, I was communicating as well, and they were giving me information. And so, all that kind of thing has been going on for, it sort of blew it all open, because they went from all different parts of the world, right, and found these artifacts.
Yeah.
And started seeing what could happen. I'm trying to follow the train of thought here of, there's also someone called Shuni from India, and he's called the Black Sun. And so in India, they say, people, like I said, they demonize the whole Black Sun thing, because all right, these are the Illuminati, these are the people that are hurting us, these are the people that want to wipe out, different races. Actually, they were not involved with any of that early on. I mean, like Shuni is just, he's the Black Sun. He is, like I said, the dark matter. He is the another aspect of our universe. And so a reflection, you can't see, they say you can't see light without darkness.
Right.
So but that doesn't make it evil. It is just the contrast of what we're experiencing. And so
Just natural polarity,
yeah, it's a natural part of our universe, which if we don't acknowledge, we are at a disadvantage scientifically, right? You can't, as a scientist, would not, neglect the fact that there is this essence of light, and then there's this darkness that exists. They don't understand what it is or how it is, but they see the interplay of it in our universe and how it affects different things. So the black sun isn't necessarily evil. It's just another, like you said, another aspect. The male energy isn't necessarily evil, nor is the female energy necessarily evil, but the both of them work together, similar to the way the light and darkness works together. But yet both can be good or evil separately, right? When we understand that.
Right. And this is kind of, it ties all into, you kind of have to go through all of those 4 chapters, like you said, together, because the Brotherhood Lodges and those mystery school teachings and those things, that's all what the Nazis, what Hitler was really after. Their other very secret Black Sun type of section or division was all about going into those occult, mysteries, mythologies of the Aryan race, trying to find that, but going to Tibet, trying to find the right, measuring the skulls and looking at the teeth and bones, and like going through all these places, looking for the spear of destiny, these ancient artifacts. I mean, Hitler really was truly seeking out these things, and he knew. I mean, they knew so to some level that this stuff was real and this stuff had real power. And so I think, and I don't know, like you said, the Black Sun, on a certain level, it's not, there's no polarity anymore. So there's no good or bad. You see that they both work together, and they both, they're there to serve a purpose, to create balance in the universe in a way. And maybe for us, for the good to really shine, you have to show some of the darkest parts of humanity. And I don't know how much Hitler really knew or thought of himself as that, but he knew that this was the time for this great awakening, this great force, and he definitely wanted to embody that, or whatever energy and people that backed him really wanted to take that to the very extreme. So
he was sorry, I was just going to say he's very similar to like Napoleon or Alexander the Great, that got kind of excited about world domination and thought, well, if we can make everything like the way we want it, it would be better, Yeah. But go ahead.
And that mentality, that world domination mentality, it kind of corrupts the original intent of what that Black Sun represented as, just a ploy. When you're, murdering millions of people and you take away other people's free wills, you're actually, impacting life on this planet. In that way, I think it kind of crosses the line to where you're more into the power struggle of it, and then the hunger for power than really the intent of what that originally represented.
Well, that's the danger of it. So these things are very, very ancient. They're connected to ET species that are out in our galaxy, in our universe. And when they're corrupted or misused, then there is repercussions. And that goes for anyone that's dabbling in the occult, to use it wield it as a weapon, or an understanding where it can open up a window to the universe to you. And so, you decide how you take that information. For example, Shani, who is the Black Sun, which is celebrated on Saturdays, and in India, for those that do acknowledge the god, they have many gods there, so that's their belief system. And so they don't eat meat. They don't, they do certain practices throughout that day, and they say if you violate that, you'll have problems. So, I mean, we can learn from some of the earlier civilizations, or the older civilizations. We can learn from the indigenous peoples, the peoples that have been here for a long time, and they, even though to us, they might seem, they don't fit into, say, the Christian paradigm, or whatever other belief system that people, Judaism, it's different, but there's elements of wisdom in all different belief systems, and that's why, we would not be so caught up in like the demonizing of some of this information, which prevents us from further understanding what was happening. So with an expansion of, all right, we can get past Hitler, we understand that he dabbled and played with things and he introduced ego, but he was also mesmerized to carry out a specific role, to create trauma on the earth, to create a world war, which he accomplished, just as Alexander the Great created a world war, and there was many others that Napoleon did. And the process of what Hitler was going to do, not just World War II, but usher in World War III, right? Which is, we're kind of there where they want to. We're on the edge of that, and it's because we haven't still got it yet, that instead of looking at what Hitler was tapping into, we pulled away from it because it felt like it was something that was all of it, pulled it all together as something that was evil, rather than understanding some of the things that he was introducing. So your grandfather mentions that they expected when Hitler came around that he was going to allow the free energy to come in.
Right. That was huge. That was a big part of it. Victor Schauberger, I guess, is one of the main ones that was mentioned, with the water wizard and using the implosion type of force, 0-point energy. And he tried to explain that to, I think it was Rudolf Hess that my grandfather mentions as really the main one that knew all of the secret technologies and was really kind of guarding that or looking at all those within the German secret societies under Hitler. So he had more access to that than even Hitler did. And Victor Schauberger would talk to him. The Schumann was one of the ones looking at this alternate energy and things like that. But my grandfather even claimed that Victor Schauberger was in Taos at one point, in Taos, right, New Mexico, which I don't know how we can get validation or confirmation on that, because I don't, just looking at, when he was alive, or whether, he was there, or maybe his son came in there later on. Who knows? I don't know how.
I think through Project Paperclip, a lot of Nazi scientists and those guys came over, and they ended up somewhere in the United States. And I think that's accurate, though. Nancy Red started to mention that.
Yeah. So there's.
It makes sense to me. I believe it if they said he was there. I've been to Taos too, and it's an you can feel the energies. There's a lot of reservations there, right, and they still maintain their connection to the stars.
Right.
So, yeah.
And our grandfather was always, like you were saying, about religion, and there's a piece of all the truth is hidden kind of within every religion in some aspects. And my grandfather was a Unitarian, or went to a Unity church, so he basically encompassed whoever wanted to was welcome and everything like that. He kind of always had that outlook early on. So that was one aspect of him. And the other thing I noticed that was kind of interesting, how he ties in the Star of David to that the male and female energy, obviously, but even that shape itself. He mentioned that, I just saw this, I didn't see it, I didn't recognize it before, like so many things in the book, but that could actually be the triangle pointing up, but then also it could be embodying a spacecraft, even the triangular shape of the spacecraft coming down to Earth. And maybe tapping into the energy of the Earth, maybe into the energies, the Earth's grid systems, those ancient grid systems. Because he even in a video talked specifically about that. Just for a brief second, he mentioned these nodal points and being able to tap into these the natural planetary grid system that exists, and the energy field that exists. So definitely know about that.
Pyramids too.
Yeah, right.
The pyramidal, the Sirius group that has been here and had an influence on humanity for thousands of years. Yeah. Still people, are aligning, connecting with that.
People say some theories are that the spacecraft would just land on top or connect to those pyramid shapes and maybe draw the energy from them or something like that.
Yeah, we had a weird, I don't know if you remember this, probably about 5 years or so. 5 years ago, there were these there was something that was lighting up, or there was ships or something hovering over the pyramids, the Great Pyramids.
Okay.
I don't know if you remember. It was in the news briefly, and then it was wiped. I mean, they just pulled it out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
For that. Yeah.
They don't want any of the disclosure part of it. I saw him talking about the Star of David, and but there was also a Venus star too that they used. But with a lot of these secret societies that they were talking about, they had specific meaning and intention. But like I said, it looked like they were trying to initiate something else, using the female energy to create different things. But here's these really great pictures in the book. To show and reveal some of the different things that were going on.
Sonic symbols.
Yeah, this is like a sun symbol on the Sig rune. And this one, of course, as well, too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he says that the Iron Cross Germans, that the deers came all the way back to the Babylonian. That was the time. So that.
Yeah, yeah, and like I said, there's a saying, there's nothing new under the sun, and or it might be from the Bible, but let me see some of these things that I was looking at. They talk about the New World Order and bringing in one of the first projects was the new technology was to create a time machine.
Right.
Which goes back.
That was the intent when the societies first started to get together and they all channeled the information. Their intent was to create a time machine, and through the process, they ended up building anti-gravity machines. I'm not sure if they ever got time travel accomplished or not, but
yeah, they did, according to Peter, and so then they created the De Glocken, right?
Right.
That's the clock, the bell, the Nazi bell, right?
The Nazi bell, and so Peter talked about how that they were, because of the knowledge that the Nazi regime was able to collect. They had the finances, the means, the researchers, the intelligence, the scientists to really pick a lot of this stuff apart, and so they jumped ahead in many different ways. And one of them was through time travel, but also they were able to go through parallels. So the Man in the High Castle is something that they actually accomplished.
Yeah, so that's, for everybody that doesn't know, that's a Netflix show about how the Axis powers won the war, the Nazis, and the Japan now control the whole Earth, now the planet after World War II. It's super fascinating, like alternate reality.
Yeah. So it actually did play out, and it's not connected to our reality now, but there was probably some bleed through for the storyline to actually come forward. Remember, they do self-disclosure, those that are involved, to inform people of how our timeline could have turned out. It's to let us know that it could have happened this way, but it didn't. Right. And so then it's interesting as you're watching the show, they revert back to us. Like, oh no, something else happened, and the Axis power didn't win, and so they're looking at us, in the show, which is kind of an interesting way to do it. But in the book, your grandfather talks about how after Nazi Germany connected to Japan, and they didn't inform Japan about what was going on until after, I think, World War II, and then they started to exchange information because they knew they could back engineer certain things. Yeah.
Okay. Oh wow, I don't remember hearing that.
Yeah, it was I could remember looking at he brings a connection there between Germany and let's see if I can find it. I don't know if I will be able to find it right now.
But yeah, as you look for that, you mentioned that he talked briefly about science of mind control and intelligence of the CIA and NSA using hypnotic scripts. That was the Nazi. It says the experiments conducted by the Nazis at Dachau. I'm not sure how to use that word, but using drugs and hypnosis ended up in America's backyard.
Right.
and then he briefly
with
mentioned
MK Ultra and all that. Yeah.
Right. And then that's when he goes into the time machine the Germans were building, the real levitation machine and the bell. And then the link between the SSE4 division of the SS, Nazi SS, and how we have our own S4 in Area 51, and how maybe that's where there's a connection there.
Yeah, no, they did say something about Japan. I'm just trying to find it really quickly. But here it is. On page 79. U.S. archives are speculations that Germany and Japan would have succeeded in one-way mission to Mars before the close of World War II. It is suspected that Germany and Japan may have successful in completing the Mars mission in a Haunebu 5. In fact, the U.S., Russia, and some German scientists manufactured a replica of the Haunebu 5, which successfully completed a mission to Mars. Although Japan was not technologically advanced as Germany, Germany needed Japan to finance its space technologies, and Japan wanted the new technology. Many people to this day don't know that both Germany and Japan secretly believed in the existence of a superior race that had been visiting Earth from some time immemorial, and the Japanese believed they were the descendants of the sun gods, a super race. Japan does not have the sunburst on its flag anymore, which was that symbol that I showed earlier, is like the sunburst. And when the Japanese were defeated, they reverted to their earlier symbol of a red circle. If Japan and Germany had united sooner, so this is the alternate, right? Between the sheer population numbers and the technology, we might not have been able to catch up. Also, if Germany had given Japan its new technology, Japan would easily have duplicated it, but Germany refused to hand it over. It wasn't until after Pearl Harbor that Japan and Germany united forces, which then undoubtedly brought out this alternate reality.
Yeah.
And then they start getting into the Foo Fighters, which was another interesting thing. But yeah, there's I always wonder, because if you look at the whole dynamic of World War III, you see, World War II. I shouldn't even say that, because I don't even want to manifest anything like that. World War II, you see the alliances were Mussolini, but you don't see Mussolini in any future connections. It doesn't seem to happen.
Yeah.
And instead, you see that the Reich starts to scatter amongst the Hispanic communities, like Spain, South America, but they don't go to Italy, or at least it's not really noted that they go to Italy.
It's not noted, but I think we know if they ended up anywhere.
Right.
I think they existed
all roads
there.
lead to Rome, so they're in Rome one way or another.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we know that, Rome has a whole bunch of collections of documents and books and ancient, I'm sure that they've been many trips there, and I've seen pictures of the Pope with Hitler before, and some of the Reich members.
Brad Olson does a great job, and I think another one within that same publishing company is what's his name, Zagami, Leo Zagami, who goes deep into the Illuminati and the Vatican. And all those ties. Is amazing, but it's there. It's been there.
It is.
He's got a book. I have it here. Confessions of an Illuminati, Leo Zagami.
Yeah. Right.
And look at that little triangle shape there. He's got got the all-seeing eye there, and the caduceus. Well, it's not quite the caduceus, just the one snake around. But yeah.
He's got many volumes. I've got one of maybe a series of books he did on that. I don't know which one you have, Dan, but yeah, it's a lot of information.
This is volume 7, so yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah, you can go really deep in that topic, and your grandfather touched on everything, so you can easily say, "Well, that's interesting. I could go even deeper."
There's so many places to go. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just found this one page also. This is showing this symbolism from Lemuria, and you can recognize the swastika style imagery there.
Yeah. He brings up Lemuria, so I feel like more than like it's not as technical as some of the other chapters where he gets into things, and it's not as much delving deep into the government agendas and all that, but mostly trying to bring up how we're more linked into this this ancient spiritual knowledge that was. It's spiritual, but it's also scientific because it's been ignored. People didn't recognize that there are the spiritual, the scientific elements, or the elements of our earth and how it works.
Yeah, we split off science and spirituality, but they used to be at one. They used to be combined, and they decided we don't want to include that anymore because it gives people too much power.
Yeah, that was the first thing I really had a hard time in school when I was studying, any type of science or whatever. But I even wrote a little essay about science versus religion, and I was like, why is there such a dichotomy or a polarization? And they're really talking about one and the same thing in a different language. It's like, why don't you just come back and put all the pieces together? Obviously, we're missing something, and we're being literally, dumbed down or given only glimpses of the true nature of reality.
Yeah.
I was like, to me, as a young person going through school, it's like, I knew it in the back of my subconsciously. It's like I'm being indoctrinated to believe in one thing and not really see the whole picture. It
was intentionally done that way. Yeah, it was intentionally done, like in when to the times of Newton, and when they were coming up with all these scientific theory, they wanted to specifically separate it from anything that had to do with the church or anything that spirituality, to make sure there was a clear division there.
Yeah, but when you start to look at some of the ancient sciences, from Egypt, from Babylon, from the ancient Assyrians, the Anunnaki, which he also brings up. He talks about the Nephilim, the Elohim, which are it's angels connecting the fallen angels, the Nephilim, the Elohim, the angels. So they're interacting, but could be categorized as extraterrestrials.
That's a huge point to bring up, and I was going to bring up that earlier. Like, we can't we keep compartmentalizing our own ideas and putting things in a box like angels and demons and extraterrestrials. And I mean, you have to realize that some level we're talking about one and the same thing, and there are the good and there are the bad, and they're influencing us on many levels.
And it's also perspective too. So for some beings have come in here, and they, like I said, if there's an imbalance, something else is going to come in and create a counter imbalance, or something's invited in that was, nefarious, but another group might not think is nefarious. And we've gone back and forth with this because people have also their, their specific, everyone wants to know, well, what soul group am I from? Or, what stars am I connected to? And then if you're like one of those, then, that there's a bit of tension or whatever. But, there are some groups that have been introduced, and they're allowed to be introduced because we got out of balance.
Right.
So, and then when we correct that balance, then their influence won't be as strong. And those nefarious groups are also influencing the groups like the Illuminati and those that are intentionally trying to hide information, because if we raise in consciousness, then they cease to exist in our plane of existence.
Right, exactly.
They kind of eliminate their control and the benefit that they're gaining from taking from us. So
yes, our ignorance is their power. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have like these the Anunnaki, that came and they were harvesting, different types of minerals and metals and things from the earth, gold, what have you, and kind of stripping the planet from it because of some of the things that they needed or thought they needed. So and then they introduced slavery.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And so but then at the same time, the Akkadians that were here at the same time, they're like one and the same, and so then they start enhancing humans through genetics.
I was going to say that for sure, people, I've mentioned this many times on our show, but the 12th Planet and the Anunnaki story, that was the first book my grandfather ever said for me, interested in anything like out of the normal that he was interested in. He said, start with this book, start with the 12th Planet. And so I just started, I ate up everything about the Anunnaki. I read every Zachariah Sitchin book and some others that other people wrote about, but I knew that there was something to that. And maybe it wasn't the whole story, but it was a big piece of the story. And then another book is called Gods of Eden, which brings back the idea of ETs influencing and interfering with us from the beginning of human civilization, and all these little weird coincidences and anomalies that occur that aren't explained, but they just seem to happen and show up at the right time to lead us in one direction or another. But I was going to say one other thing while I remember. We are all like human antennas. We are our own radio antennas. So whatever we're tuning to and whatever with our pineal gland and everything else, we create that. We attract that, whether it's good or whether it's bad. So that's why everybody sees something different. It's not all the same. And people need to realize how powerful we are to attract those forces.
Yeah. I have our grandfather's version of Gods of Eden, actually.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Good book. Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice to be able to have some of the tools and the knowledge. He has a great library.
Yeah, Derek and I both were able to retain some of his collection. It's very, very informative. Yeah.
Oh, I bet. Well, you could see he did his research. Yeah. And so another thing I was going to say is that there's also people that say, immediately you mentioned Zachariah Sitchin, and there are people that are like 100% like everything that he did, and then there's others that say no, he only had a part of it, or he had a, that's not the way it was supposed to be interpreted, or whatever. And just like the ancient Hindus or whatever, that there's pieces of information in there that are very, very interesting. And had he not brought that up, the discussion wouldn't be on the table of everything that happened. Yeah.
Right.
So it forces people to look deeper, and whether you agree with something or not, I think rather than complain about those that are putting out the information, dig deeper yourself and prove it otherwise. Not to just do that, but to further inform humanity of some of the pieces that we might have missed.
So I'll just give you one point about Zachariah that I always question. I was like, why does he always think in these very like nuts and bolts terms as far as how did they get here and how did they come from Nibiru to Earth? And it's always almost like through rocket propulsion. I'm like, well, if they're that advanced and they can live for almost forever, why are they still using rocket propulsion and have to wait 3,600 years to come at the right time? That's the only time they can interact with us. It's like there's something a little bit odd about that. So I think he was steered in a direction and how much he could disclose, and he didn't want to go off a certain path, and he wanted to stick to just what the writings, what he found, and try to interpret him how it fit his story too. So
well, he's a language, he was a language interpreter. He was one that was he was explaining what the literal meaning was according to ancient Sumerian. That doesn't mean that he understands space science on specific levels, and it doesn't necessarily mean he has access to files like some groups like the ACIO, or maybe there's some others that I know that there's other governments or whatever that have knowledge on different types of technology. So I wouldn't fault him on that. I mean, I would say that he to the best of his knowledge, that's what it felt like. I do have recall because of my connection to Ishtar. And I do remember that it was organized, that there were battles, specific battles. There were, it was like tribal. It was very, very tribal, so. It was almost like Ishtar was almost like a spy, would go in and connect to the rulers. I think even get in relationships with them, and then kind of figure out what they were up to, that sort of thing.
So
Yeah.
Ishtar was like the main female god within the Indian type of culture. Is that right?
It's ancient Sumerian. Yeah, and she wasn't considered a god, but she was connected at the time. She was just one of the Anunnaki.
Right.
So she was an ET. Yeah, we'll say it like that, but yeah.
And that's what she was like, Ishtar / Inanna. Inanna was the Indian version, I guess.
Yeah.
But I think that's what Sakurai was mentioning a lot, of how these gods, or these godhead figures, are kind of have these different names depending where you in the world you're looking.
Yeah. Different associations in the mythologies, but they're all based on the same thing.
Yeah. But each one of these beings were people that, you could be incarnated as one of them. If you I have recall, wasn't aware of it, but it was, I talk about it in the Andronicus transmissions connected to Semiramis, and it was like they pulled me out of time through the reptilians, and then reinserted me with the Anunnaki. And so it became this really so I would have appeared as a god, but it was more like a time traveler or someone that was abducted or an abductee.
Wow.
And so, and I do have, I remember the social structure. It was advanced, but ET based, and they introduced some of the government type of rulings, laws, and things of that nature on the planet. So each time you have a group of ETs that come in, they introduce something different. Like during the Roman Empire, they introduced our court system, essentially, our legislature, our political system. It all comes from ancient Rome in the U.S. Right? So at that time, they had these, I don't know if they call them people that were coming out of the ocean, these water people on boats. And they literally would come up from the ocean. They go to the coast and they kill everyone. In this historical accounts, this is during the time of Rome. So obviously this is an intervention. Some people think because they came out of the water that they were Atlantean.
So what is that story? Yeah, where's that story come from?
It's in history. It's in history that the ancient Romans, I'll find the links for you. And in ancient Rome, they had these underwater civilizations that they'd show up. They were like an army. And the coastal people were afraid of them. They're terrified of them, and they were giants. They were taller than the average person.
Poseidon, the idea of Poseidon and that, or Neptune, that type of the water things. But
yeah, this was literally. It looked like almost like, say, if you had, if you were a Native American and you lived in the United States or in the Americas, or Turtle Island. That's another word they use. Then the Vikings showed up. So are they gods, or are they from another place?
Right.
And essentially they came to the Americas, and they started fighting and killing whoever they saw. That they would go into that mode, and they get into battles, and then they would leave. Mm-hmm. They'd get on their boats and they'd leave. The same thing happened to ancient Rome. And so the scientists don't know what civilization they came from. They know where the Vikings came from, but they never quite figured out where this other group came from. And if you listen to people that do research about Ireland in their connection to Atlantis, and they talk about Skada, who was an Egyptian queen. Actually, I think it was the daughter of Cleopatra that might have navigated to Ireland, and they have evidence of this Egyptian influence a long time ago, or right around, in Ireland. But they also talk about these ancient groups of people that came out of the ocean, that they didn't know who they were, and they were warriors. Yeah. So we've had a lot of groups showing up in time.
Yeah. Definitely.
Wow, yeah.
So your grandfather in the book talks about the I think it's in Brazil where they found spaceships.
He does talk about them bringing over when they went to Antarctica, also going into South America, Argentina and Brazil, moving a lot of the Third Reich and the technology, and he goes into Admiral Byrd and everything.
Yeah, and you know, like he also mentions too that a lot of these groups that they did research on and they interacted with claimed that they were connected to the Pleiadians.
Hmm.
And that was something else that I read.
It's amazing how much information he goes through in here.
It is crazy. Yeah.
All the things that he mentions, it's like you have to read it like 3 or 4 times and you always find some new thing in there, you know.
Yeah, because he's good. He does. I mean, I don't know. He's good at hiding things right in front of you. Like there's little you wouldn't expect it there, but then there's a couple of things he says that you find in the chapters, and it's like, wow, okay.
Okay, so here on page 97, if we look at the historical facts, we must admit that our history books are inaccurate at best. For the true forefathers of the continent are the American Indians, which he mentions regarding this brotherhood or the Declaration of Independence and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And he says, and where did they come from? Has it ever been actually told? If you ask them, talking about the indigenous people, they will tell you that they came from the stars. The Mesoamerican Indians, the Dogons, the Aboriginal people, all claim descent from Sirius or the Pleiades.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So the indigenous people are definitely have that connection, and we're talking about the good Pleiadians, not the 12T that Peter talks about, which is they have a lot of problems.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, they talk about the serpent mounds as well. That's over in Ohio.
Yeah.
Right.
And the connection to this serpent energy that's connected to the female energy on the earth.
Right, and I mean the way that he goes back, and now the oldest of record is usually going to be more of a feminine dominated, matriarchal type of society, and I think he knew that. And it seems like, yeah, the serpent, we tie the serpent to being negative all the time, but in a lot of ways it's probably because we're trying to mask some of even the feminine energy that it possessed.
Yeah, it's the Kundalini energy. It's more of that rather than the Nagas,
Right.
which are another species that are kind of like a snake. But in ancient Egypt, they have the serpent on the top of usually depicted on the top of their head. And it's not just that they're carrying a serpent, but actually it's symbolic of that Kundalini energy or the higher knowledge. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Interesting.
But there's so much in here. He quotes from the Hopi, and they talk about, he says that we will see a time when the sky itself is on fire. The alchemists use fire to extract pure gold. We can see this coming to pass today when the people are aware that the military intelligence agencies are at war with each other. Then those agencies under the Illuminati will lose their power as they try to take over the oil and gold and drugs in Iraq and Afghanistan. We see this now. Only the truth can set us free. Will we choose the truth or the consequences?
His book was actually one of the titles before they went with Life was the Cosmos Clearance was supposed to be Truth or Consequences, actually.
Yeah.
One of the things he had.
The original title. Exactly.
Yeah, I actually have drafts of the book when it was the title was Truth or Consequences. Have boxes of the different chapters and things when he was putting it together. Him and Nancy read stuff.
That makes a lot of sense because it does it brings you to a point where you make a choice and you make a decision with where you're going to go with it, and kind of waking up to the fact that whether we're in self-destructive mode or whether we are in a place of consciousness. And as I said, we remain a prisoner when we stay in this lower vibrational consciousness, connecting to this ET group that clearly these groups that clearly are benefiting from us being in lower consciousness and have more access not only to, the essential minerals on the earth or gold or whatever, but also they're more interested in even life force energy, which they're so depleted of.
Mhm.
And so we have been assisting them, inadvertently by helping them use this energy, but they don't use it for any good purpose necessarily.
Yeah, and it's really, it makes sense for the material he presented in this book. He talks about the heavy dark side and then the indigenous people on the light side, and there are two paths, like you said, and it's presenting the information for us to choose and us to decide.
Yeah. He wasn't afraid to go into the darker side of things to show people how far it went and where it was all leading. And do you want to go down that path, or do you want to choose the lighter path and spiritual?
Right. And there's also the whole idea of advanced technology and being entrusted with advanced technology, whether it's used just for the elite accesses it to use it to leverage whatever power they want, that whether they want to jump back into time and create a scenario where they win the lottery, or they dominate all of the Earth's resources. For example, the utilizing and charging people for energy when it's supposed to be free, for oil, for different things that should be, not just oil, but I think we can do an even less destructive way of retrieving energy for transportation and for communication and just, keeping our homes warm or whatever. And there's a more organic way to do it. And they've denied us of that because they couldn't isolate it and then figure out a way to charge us for that. And that's pretty much why we don't have that Tesla technology available. They did have it for a period of time. You can see it in the mud flood buildings. But if no one's making money off of it, they're trying to tear down all the remnants of it so people will forget.
Exactly. Yeah, because if the technology they're suppressing ever got out to humanity and we were able to use it to our benefit, the world would be a whole new paradigm, a whole shift, and we would be able to evolve into a new consciousness, because we wouldn't be worried about survival. We wouldn't be worried about making money to pay our bills and get electric power, because you'd be able to be a creative entity and really fulfill our ultimate potential here on the planet. We'd be so much further advanced as a species. It's a shame, but that's like ultimately what we have to overcome. But it's going to be pretty ugly, I think, getting there.
I think we, I don't want to use the word fight, but essentially we have to win back or regain or, create a better balance of where we're at and understand what's important, what isn't important, and recognize too that, any piece of information might be valuable to some degree, even though it might not encompass everything that you believe. Take that information with you and then bring it to the next level of research and find out what is the deeper truths of what you're learning and what you understand that can expand you enough that you can lift, rather than getting stuck and getting angry, because it's really easy to be angry right now with all the agendas playing out, and you'll own nothing and you'll be you'll be happy, and all these ridiculous lies that they're throwing at humanity right now. And not that they're lying that they want to do it. They definitely want to follow through and make this happen. But for us to say that we don't consent to any of it, and that we have a higher purpose, we're connected to the divine source, and that, there's nothing that they can offer us.
Right.
They created the problem, and now they're coming up saying they're solving the problem. No, that's the Illuminati playing games with humanity. And we know what the solution is. It's just going back to what is natural. We don't create the carbon footprint, and all this other stuff. It's all part of the agenda to further imprison humanity, and they're not even in control. Kind of like the mesmerizers, like I said with Hitler, they're also being manipulated to say these crazy things because or to want to depopulate or want to, just obey whatever that system is, thinking they're gaining some kind of reward for themselves. So
yeah, ultimately we have to empower ourselves and step into our own power and gain back our own sovereignty, and and not acquiesce to what they put on us, or acknowledge that they have power, and buy into their fear and their games and their propaganda. And that's really the only way that we're as a collective consciousness going to overcome this. And it's, us informing each other and helping each other heal, and allowing ourselves to be our best selves, and to get into that unique power that we each have. And until we claim that for ourselves, it's going to be a tough road, because there's so much manipulation with the media and everything. People just don't have that opportunity to really step into that and shine.
yeah, and I always recommend people, don't close your eyes to what's happening around you. That way you can reframe your, use your energy to rebalance that, and to bring in the opposite, which is the positive scenario outcome. Right. And yeah, I mean, I have a news site in the Andronetalks news, and it brings in all sorts of different articles. People can see what's going on, but don't get deep into the anger of it. Release it, and then say that we want to see the change happen on the planet, and all those agendas that they're putting out there is for their own survival, not for ours. And when I say they, I mean this whatever negative group of ETs are behind some of it in the Illuminati, maybe the reptilians, or some of these grays that just are depleted. And so there's a place for them too in the universe, but it's not necessarily here running our world. We're supposed to be running our world.
Yeah.
So if
read all that.
right.
Yeah.
So if you would introduce any last thoughts regarding what your grandfather wanted to bring in, say not just maybe with these last 3 chapters that we covered, or anything else regarding the book as a whole.
There's a lot more. I mean, there's a lot more. He'll go into more on the Majestic 12 and his involvement within RO and the intelligence agencies themselves. But yeah, we can get to that the next time. But yeah, I wanted to just relate the fact that he was, at the end of his life, he was much more like spiritual and much more with the Native American teachings, and he was a small part Cherokee, I guess. So he tried to hold on to that and really walk with that. But then I think it's important for people to know, like you guys were saying, you can't just hide it. You have to look at, lift up the rock and look at what's underneath, but don't let it get you down. Don't let it, take up all your energy. Learn how to transmute that and use it to your own benefit. And as much as you look at the negative side, you have to also focus on the positive future that we have ahead of us, because that our intentions and our thoughts create our reality. So we have to remember that we constantly have to feed ourselves to that positive timeline that we want. So at the end of the day, we're all here for a reason. This is a huge phase of growing pain that we all have to go through, but there's going to be light on the end of the tunnel on the other side. We just have to be willing to work together and not fight over everything, not keep fighting at each other, for one, and yeah, know that we can get through this if we hold on to our intentions and hold on to our thoughts and think about a brighter future.
Yeah, great summary. I mean, that was really his message, where our spiritual path for humanity is fulfillment of the Hopi prophecy, is what he would talk about. And he has one of the messages from the Hopi in the front of the book, and at the end it says, we are the ones we've been waiting for. It all comes from within us, and we're the key to the path to our own enlightenment.
Well, perfect. Thank you, guys. And thank you, Derek, Daniel, for being here. And thank you to your grandfather, who's here in spirit, I'm sure, Daniel Salter. And this is the second part for those of you that have been listening to. We're going to go into a third part at a later date. Thank you, everyone. And we can share any information that you want about your show and where people can reach you.
Yeah. We have our show called Shred the Veil, basically, furthering our grandfather's legacy and trying to bring forth disclosure and some of the other topics with spirituality and our evolution and the awakening. And it's on infinite.tv, so we can put some links in here in the show.
Hope to see you guys out there as well.
Okay, yeah, so you're going to have some other shows there, and we just recently,
Oh yeah.
we have some other shows out there, and we just did a show with Peter the Insider. I don't know when that's going to be ready, but regarding the wing makers.
That's right.
And for people, when they follow the link to Infinite TV, we'll put that out there. It is a free subscription for anyone who wants to sign in and take a look at our content. So.
Yeah, we really enjoy working with you, Jessica, and can't wait to talk more with Peter the Insider too. I think this is we all find our own, our own breadcrumbs and where they go, and so this is definitely one direction we're following. So, thank you for that.
Oh, perfect, thank you. We appreciate it too. It's nice. It's nice to be able to talk openly and someone that has some background knowledge that they understand. Some of the things that are happening out there and from your grandfather that has earlier informed you. But I just want to say to our audience, thank you very much for listening. We hope to continue to give you some good information and to help in this whole expansion of our path and consciousness here on the planet. Have a great day and stay positive.
You have been listening to Andronetalks Radio. Join us on YouTube channel Jessica Arael Morocco and visit our website at www.readingsbyarael.com.